Have you ever stopped to consider just how much your personal device knows about you? It is a silent observer that tracks your every movement and catalogs your daily habits with terrifying precision. In the year 2014, a young woman vanished from her quiet suburban home in the Pacific Northwest, leaving behind only silence and a single digital footprint. Her family believed she had left of her own accord to clear her head, but the data hidden deep within the cellular network told a much darker story. This is the case where technology became the star witness and revealed a hidden timeline that shattered a perfect alibi. The mystery begins on a rainy Tuesday evening in November within the dense forests of Oregon. Alice Monroe was a 32-year-old graphic designer known for her punctuality and her close relationship with her sister. She lived in a modest craftsman-style house with her husband of 5 years named Thomas. To the outside world, they were the picture of marital bliss, but behind closed doors the atmosphere was growing cold. On the night of November 11th, Alice sent a text message to her sister, promising to meet for lunch the next day. That lunch never happened, and Alice was never seen alive again. When Alice failed to show up at the cafe, her sister immediately felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. She called Alice repeatedly, but every call went straight to voicemail. By that evening, she had contacted the local police department to file a missing persons report. The officers arrived at the Monroe residence to find Thomas appearing distraught and confused. He told the investigators that Alice had taken her car for a drive late the previous night to blow off steam after a minor argument. He claimed she had packed a bag and said she needed space for a few days. The initial search for Alice Monroe focused on the winding roads and scenic overlooks where Thomas claimed she liked to drive. Patrol cars scanned the highways and volunteers combed the dense woods bordering the town. Despite days of searching, there was no sign of her silver sedan and no credit card activity to suggest she was staying at a hotel. The case began to grow cold almost as soon as it had started. Without a body or a crime scene, the police had little evidence to challenge the story Thomas had provided. He remained cooperative and played the part of the grieving husband perfectly. Detective James Halloway was the lead investigator assigned to the case, and he had a nagging suspicion that something was wrong with the timeline Thomas had presented. Halloway was a veteran of the force who had seen enough domestic cases to know that the husband is always the first suspect. However, Thomas had a solid alibi for the entire night of the disappearance. He had been at home watching movies, and his home security system showed no doors opening or closing during the critical hours. It seemed like a dead end, until Halloway decided to look at the invisible evidence floating in the air. In the early days of the investigation, the police relied on standard phone records, which only showed incoming and outgoing calls. These records confirmed that Alice had not used her phone to speak to anyone after 8 o'clock that evening. But Detective Halloway knew that modern smartphones were constantly communicating with cell towers, even when not in use. He issued a warrant for the raw data dumps from every cell tower within a 50-mile radius of the Monroe home. What he received was a chaotic ocean of digital noise that would require months to decipher. The data arrived in massive spreadsheets containing thousands of rows of numbers and coordinates. To the untrained eye, it looked like gibberish, but to a digital forensics expert, it was a map of human behavior. Halloway enlisted the help of a specialist named Sarah Chen, who had a reputation for finding patterns where others saw only chaos. Sarah began the tedious process of filtering the data to isolate the unique identifier of the phone belonging to Alice. She was looking for the handshake signals that a phone exchanges with a tower to maintain a connection. As Sarah Chen began to plot the data points on a digital map, a strange picture began to emerge. According to the story, Thomas told police Alice had left the house at 10 o'clock and drove west toward the coast. However, the cell tower data showed her phone pinging a tower directly east of their home at 10:15. This was the first crack in the alibi. The phone was not moving toward the ocean, but rather it was heading deep into the rugged mountain terrain of the Cascade Range. The device was moving at a speed consistent with a vehicle traveling on the interstate. The investigation shifted gears as Halloway and Chen realized they were tracking a ghost. The phone continued to ping towers along a lonely stretch of highway for nearly an hour. This contradicted everything Thomas had said during his interviews. If Alice had gone west, she would have lost signal quickly in the canyons, but the eastern route had strong coverage. The data showed the phone stopping abruptly near a remote logging road at 11:30 at night. It remained stationary at that location for exactly 45 minutes before moving again. This 45-minute window became the focal point of the entire investigation. What was happening on that dark logging road in the middle of the night? The location was miles from civilization and surrounded by dense pine forest. Detective Halloway theorized that this was the disposal site. He organized a massive search team to scour the specific area, identified by the cell tower triangulation. It was a needle in a haystack, but now they knew which haystack to search. The team brought in cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar. While the search team worked in the mountains, Detective Halloway brought Thomas back in for questioning. He did not reveal the existence of the cell phone data immediately. Instead, he asked Thomas to recount his story one more time. Thomas repeated his tale of the coastal drive with unwavering confidence. He described the route Alice supposedly took and the specific clothes she was wearing. Halloway listened quietly and took notes, waiting for the trap to snap shut. The arrogance of the suspect was palpable in the interrogation room. Back in the forensics lab, Sarah Chen discovered another anomaly in the data that turned the case upside down. She noticed that while the phone belonging to Alice was moving east, the phone belonging to Thomas was also active. His device was not making calls, but it was registering health data. The step counter on his phone showed a burst of intense physical activity during the exact time he claimed to be sleeping on the couch. Between midnight and 1 in the morning, Thomas had taken 3,000 steps inside his own home. This internal data from the phone of Thomas painted a picture of a man who was frantically busy rather than asleep. Halloway hypothesized that Thomas was cleaning the crime scene while his wife or her phone was being transported away. But this theory presented a major problem. If Thomas was at home stepping around his living room, who was driving the phone belonging to Alice into the mountains? The timeline was split into two concurrent realities that did not seem to match up. The detective needed to find the missing link. The breakthrough came when Sarah Chen analyzed the signal strength of the pings from the phone of Alice. She noticed that the signal was remarkably consistent and did not show the usual fluctuations of a phone held in a hand or a pocket. It suggested the phone was stationary inside the moving vehicle, perhaps sitting on a dashboard or a passenger seat. Then she found a second signal moving in perfect tandem with the phone of Alice. It was a burner phone that had been activated just hours before the murder. Halloway traced the purchase of the burner phone to a convenience store in a neighboring town. Security footage from the store showed a figure in a hooded sweatshirt buying the device with cash. The resolution was too low to identify the face, but the build and height matched a known associate of Thomas. It was his younger brother, Michael. The police realized that Thomas had not acted alone. He had enlisted his brother to drive the car and the phone away from the scene to create a false digital trail. The plan was clever, but it relied on the police only looking at the surface-level location data. Thomas and Michael did not understand the depth of information stored in the network. They assumed that if the phone went east, the police would believe Alice went east. They did not account for the health data on the phone of Thomas or the ability of the police to link the burner phone to the primary device. The hidden timeline was now fully exposed, revealing a conspiracy between the two brothers. Armed with this new information, Detective Halloway ordered the arrest of Michael Monroe. When faced with the overwhelming evidence of the cell tower pings and the security footage, Michael crumbled. He confessed that Thomas had killed Alice in a fit of rage and called him for help. Michael admitted to driving the car to the mountains and burying the body near the logging road. He confirmed that he had kept the phone of Alice turned on to mislead the authorities before destroying it. The confession from Michael provided the precise coordinates of the burial site. The search team, which had been working in the general area for days, was able to locate the remains of Alice Monroe within hours. She was found exactly where the digital ghost had stopped for 45 minutes. The discovery brought a tragic end to the hope of finding her alive, but it provided the necessary physical evidence to charge Thomas with first-degree murder. The digital timeline had led them straight to the truth. Thomas was arrested at his home while he was in the middle of packing a suitcase. He appeared shocked that his carefully constructed alibi had failed. In the interrogation room, Halloway finally laid out the maps showing the two diverging timelines. He showed Thomas the red line of his brother driving east and the blue line of his own frantic steps inside the house. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. The technology Thomas used every day had betrayed him in the most absolute way possible. The trial of Thomas Monroe was a spectacle that drew national attention. The prosecution built their entire case around the visual representation of the cell phone data. They projected giant maps onto the courtroom walls, showing the jury the movement of the devices. It was a new kind of evidence for many people in the courtroom. The defense tried to argue that cell tower data was unreliable and subject to technical errors, but the testimony of Sarah Chen was unshakable. Sarah Chen explained to the jury how the handshake between a phone and a tower is a unique digital fingerprint. She demonstrated how the signal strength indicated the phone was in a car, and how the timing matched the confession of the brother perfectly. The jury watched as the hidden timeline was reconstructed minute by minute. It was a chilling demonstration of how impossible it is to truly disappear in the modern world. The digital exhaust we leave behind is permanent and irrefutable. The most damning piece of evidence was the health data from the phone of Thomas. The prosecution brought in a sports medicine expert to testify that the step cadence recorded by the phone was consistent with heavy lifting and rapid movement like cleaning or carrying objects. This contradicted the testimony of Thomas that he was asleep. The jury could see the lie expressed in raw numbers. It was math versus a man, and the math was not capable of lying. After a 3-week trial, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They returned a verdict of guilty on all charges. Thomas Monroe was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His brother Michael received a reduced sentence in exchange for his testimony. The family of Alice Monroe finally had justice, although it did little to heal the pain of their loss. The case set a new precedent for how digital evidence would be used in future criminal trials. The conviction of Thomas Monroe sent shockwaves through the legal community. It highlighted the shift from physical forensics like fingerprints and DNA to digital forensics. Criminals could wear gloves to hide their prints, but they could not easily hide the signals beaming from their pockets. The case became a textbook example for detectives across the country on how to subpoena and analyze raw tower data. It changed the standard operating procedure for missing persons cases. In the years following the trial, Detective Halloway retired from the force, but he often spoke about the Monroe case at police academies. He emphasized that the modern detective must be part investigator and part data analyst. He warned young officers that the most important witness in a homicide case is often a silicon chip. The timeline that Thomas Monroe tried to hide was etched into the servers of a telecom company, waiting for someone with the right key to unlock it. The legacy of Alice Monroe lives on in the changes made to how emergency services and police handle location data. Laws were updated to allow law enforcement quicker access to tower dumps in critical missing persons cases. The technology that was once a passive utility has become an active tool for justice. The tragedy of her death paved the way for a system that is harder to fool and quicker to respond. As we look back on this case, we are reminded of the double-edged sword of technology. It strips away our privacy and tracks our every move, but it also holds the power to speak for the dead. The cell phone data that revealed the hidden timeline proved that in the digital age there are no secrets. Every step we take and every message we send becomes part of a permanent record that can save us or condemn us. The story of the Monroe case serves as a grim warning to those who believe they can outsmart the system. The digital eyes of the world are always watching. The towers that line our highways and the satellites that orbit our planet are silent sentinels. They do not judge and they do not forget. They simply record the truth, one byte at a time, waiting for the moment when the truth needs to be heard. So the next time you look at your phone, remember the case of Alice Monroe. Remember that the device in your hand is constantly writing the story of your life. It is a story of coordinates and timestamps that can never be erased. In the quiet forests of Oregon, a hidden timeline was brought into the light, and justice was served by the invisible waves that connect us all. We must ask ourselves if we are truly prepared for a world where privacy is an illusion. The data that convicted Thomas Monroe is the same data that is collected from all of us every single day. It is a tool of immense power that requires careful oversight. But for the family of Alice Monroe, it was the only thing that mattered. It was the voice that spoke when Alice could not, and it was the map that brought her home.